Big win for the Indiana Pacers over the Orlando Magic this weekend. And it wasn't just big because they got a road win for the first time in over 2 months. It was also big because two guys in particular had key outings. That's Jordan Nwora and Jalen Smith. We'll talk about the importance of those games and the Pacers win all on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, diving into a big Saturday performance from the Pacers, not only because of the results, getting back on track on the road, which, believe it or not, Pacers' first road win of the entire calendar year came on Saturday in Orlando, but also two big games from two reserves that are pretty important to monitor down the stretch of the season in Jordan Nwora and Jalen Smith. We'll talk about the big games from both of those guys, why it's important. Plus, of course, we'll get through everything about this game and why it was a big deal for the Pacers. And that's where we're going to start, going down to Orlando, where the Pacers get their first road win since December 23rd, 2022, and they beat the Heat on Haliburton's heroics by beating the Magic. It's their first road win in 64 days. They've still only won in Florida and Indiana since they beat Boston last December, but they needed a road win. They got it, especially because they have a trip coming. They're definitely playing better recently. They played well against Chicago and Utah despite losing that game. They played very well against Boston despite losing that game. So team in a bit of a better form, and they showed that again in Orlando. Let's talk about the game really quickly, though. First, Goga Bitadze played for the Magic, his debut for Orlando. Cool to see him on a different team and wearing a normal number, 35 instead of 88. He had 6 points, 6 rebounds, and an assist, and had a big hug with Tyrese Haliburton after the game, which was, of course, cool to see. And also, if you're on YouTube, you'll see I'm in an IU hat because they beat Purdue this weekend, which was fantastic for me. If you're a Purdue listener or viewer, I apologize for that, but I have to be happy about it today, and I very rarely get to break out hats these days. So big win for the Pacers for many reasons. The road win and the way they did it, I think, was really impressive too. Not because they won by so much, but because they did it in a way that they always talk about being really important. And by they, I mostly mean Rick Carlisle, but the team in general does stress this a lot. And when you talk to Carlisle and this team about defense, something they always bring up is points in a quarter. Not that they have a specific number in mind, but I've said this on the show before. Carlisle always references this benchmark of 30. And if you give up 30 a quarter, you still give up 120. That's kind of a lot, but the average offensive rating in the NBA now is like 115. If you hold a team under 30 all 4 quarters, they'll score 116, right? So like you're right there. It's about 100 possessions per game, a little lower than that, I guess. So 30 is like the high mark of what the Pacers want to allow in a quarter. And in this game, they gave up 25 in the first, 27 in the second, and 22 in the third, 34 in the fourth. But a lot of that actually came late in the game when it was, very much already decided. Pacers were up by over 21 before winning by 13. They were up 21 in the middle of the fourth, right? So some coasting going on, certainly to influence that last number. And that was big for this Pacers team. I won't say that the Magic have some league-changing, world-changing offense. It's not amazing, but they have been a much better team since their crummy start, and so defending them well is still impressive. They still have talented players on their team, but the Pacers had a good defensive outing, and what made it impressive is everybody kind of chipped in, right? Another good defense, like the normal suspects you kind of expect to defend well at this stage with your Nesmiths, with your Turners, with your Nembards, but it's when you get good defensive games. This is the second one in a row from your Benedict Matherins, when TJ McConnell and Jalen Smith are in perfect sync. Amazing Jalen Smith defensive game, career high 5 blocks for him. We'll get to him at the end. Duarte defended well. Jordan Nwora played far and away his best game as a Pacer. His defense was adequate. Like, they got good D from everybody basically, and that was huge against this Magic team, and that's why the Pacers were able to play their game, because defense is so huge for them because of how much it impacts their offense. I've talked about this a lot too, but again, on display in this game, this team wants to run. They want to get out in transition and run down your throat, and it's important to get stops and rebounds to do that. Assistant coach Ronald Nwora did the halftime interview on the Bally Sports Indiana broadcast with Jeremiah Johnson, and he said the key to the second half would be to continue to defend well so they can push in transition and get out and run and play the way they want to play. And they did exactly that, right? Amazing third quarter. They 17-2 run to start the second frame by the Pacers. Of course, that 2 is awesome. That 17 is good too because they turn those stops into points. In the end, 70 points in the second half for the Pacers as they get a 121-108 win in Orlando. Really impressive performance everywhere. Like, obviously, the defense, I think, was the catalyst. That's why I led with it and discussed it so much. But the fact that it led to offense, this is how the Pacers want to play and win, is exactly how they played in that game. Because when they're running like that, and when they're getting into their early offense and when they're comfortable, that lets some of these role players, or I don't even know if role player is the right word, guys who have a non-primary ball handler job description, have good games. Buddy Hield did not have a particularly effective night. He couldn't get going for a while, but a lot of guys like Nembhard, for example, had 13 points. Benedict Mathurin had 19. Jordan Nwora was excellent with 18. Jalen Smith was hitting shots. McConnell was hitting shots, right? They got something from everybody because those guys have an easier life and easier time out there when the Pacers are playing the way that they want to play. And that's exactly what happened in this game. So credit to the Pacers. When they play their game, they're better. Who knew? And it was a team effort to get it done. But the guy you got to highlight all the time with the Pacers is their all-star in Tyrese Haliburton. I can't explain the difference, but I'm sure those of you who watched the game saw this, and I'll try to explain it. When he's at his absolute best, he just plays with this joy and this smile and this just like he has a killer look, but at the same time, he's like laughing about it. It doesn't make sense. But he was so peppy and had this extra beat in his step that made him just look unstoppable in this game. And he didn't even have to shoot very much to be the most unstoppable player on the court. He only took 9 shots, right? That's the tied for 4th amongst the starters, right? Usually, after games like this, he'll come on the podium and say something to the effect of, I need to be more aggressive. I need to be, it's actually selfish when I'm not shooting more because of what it does for our offense. And he's right when he says that. But in this game, 14 assists for Tyrese Haliburton. That is what the Pacers needed him to be. And recently, his teams have kind of given him more attention correctly because he's an all-star level talent. You'll see more that Haliburton's kind of off the ball, right? Nembhard takes it up more, McConnell and him overlap more, and that's been working fine. But in this game, he figured out that, or I guess he figures this out a lot. But in this game, he also figured out that, in those situations, passes are there for him. Passing is there for him. And he was connecting with everybody in a very impressive way. Of course, that's the case when you have 14 assists. But the one guy he linked up with the most was Miles Turner. They were brilliant all night. Their pick and roll game was fantastic. And some of this was credit to the Pacers for this. They got Wendell Carter Jr., the Magic starting center, in foul trouble so fast. Carter Jr. had 3 fouls in the first 6 minutes of this game. A lot of Mo Wagner and Goga for the Magic in the center spot. And the Pacers just went at that. Tons of dishes from Haliburton to Turner, and they were really flashy and fun, which of course is exciting to see. Turner finishes with 24 points on 19 shots. He's been on a tear offensively since the All-Star break. Of course, it's only been 2 games, but they've both been fantastic. And so credit to the Pacers, led by their All-Star, for getting it done. And a lot of guys stepped up, like I said, but Haliburton was, of course, the catalyst, and Turner with 24-8 gets it done. And that's a big win for the Pacers. Obviously, getting a road win to set the tone for a road trip, getting a little on track. They've won 2 of their last 4, which sounds like too short of a stretch to analyze like that, but they need any sort of little victory they can get at this stage. But the other reason this win is important is the tiebreaker with the standings. The Magic were hot on their tail, half a game behind the Pacers entering the night. Had the Pacers lost in Orlando, they would have fallen to 13th in the Eastern Conference. Far and away their lowest standing in the conference of the season, I guess, unless you count when they were 0-2. But either way, you get what I'm saying. From a reasonable season standpoint perspective, that would have been the lowest they've been. Instead, they win, which was their 3rd win against the Magic, which clinches them the tiebreaker over Orlando. And that could be relevant for the plan. There's not a lot of separation in this Washington. I guess you can count Toronto in here. Atlanta's playing well again, so they've kind of moved up. But this Toronto, Washington, Indiana, Orlando, Chicago, I don't know what's after quartet, what 5 is. I should know that. That group, I mean, it looks like the Bulls and the Wizards and the Raptors are a little bit ahead, but the Pacers and Magic could move into there if they play at their best. And so getting a tiebreak over any of those teams is big for the Pacers, and they did by beating Orlando. On Thursday's show, our first segment, we'll talk about the tiebreakers the Pacers have and why they're crucial down the stretch of the season. But for this game specifically, I want to talk about the play of 2 guys who had really solid and really important outings for the Pacers, and that's Jordan Nwora, who had far and away his best game as a Pacer, and Jalen Smith, the backup 5 who was back in the rotation. We'll start with Nwora in our upcoming segment. Before we do that, though, let me talk to you guys about Prize Picks. It's daily fantasy made easy. All you do you think Luka Doncic will score more or less than 26.5 points, or LeBron will have more or less than 7.5 rebounds? Whatever player, whatever the stat, you pick that player versus a Prize Picks projection, and that's how you play. You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they'll score more or less than that projection, you can up to 25 times your money. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. That's why I like it. You can't get out researched. It's just you versus them. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watched, including the NBA, NFL, MLB, which is finally back, sort of, and college sports. You can make your entries in a minute or less. It's safe with fast withdrawals and operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com. Sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit 100, Prize Picks will give you 100. If you deposit 50, Prize Picks will give you 50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, let's start with Locked On Blazers because, 71 for Damian Lillard. My goodness. Ridiculous performance from Dame against the Rockets. Should there be an asterisk when you have a big scoring game against the Rockets? Either way, 71's insane. Dame's insane. Mike Richmond will have it all for you over at Locked On Blazers. Here at Locked On Pacers, though, let's talk about Jordan Nwora, who was awesome for the Pacers in their win over the Magic. So much so that Rick Carlisle singled him out after the game, and Jalen Smith. He said Jalen Smith and Jordan Nwora were exceptional off the bench. For Nwora, far and away, not even close, his best game as a Pacer. He finished with 18 points. Let's start there with the scoring. 18 points for Nwora, his first double-digit scoring night as a Pacer. His first double-digit scoring game since he had 14 with the Bucks over a month ago. That was against the Pacers, fittingly enough. So, yes, if you got to go back 3 double-digit games for Nwora's first 10-plus point game that wasn't with the Pacers involved, you get the gist of what I'm saying, though. He scored at a high level, one of his best scoring games of this entire season, quite frankly, even dating back to that time with Milwaukee. Now, here's the part that I think got kind of lost in the sauce as people discussed his game. Jordan Nwora went 7 for 7 on 2-point shots. That's huge for him. If you've been listening to the show, we talked about the trade with him, with other guests and stuff, or with Bucks people, that is where he's kind of struggled the most throughout his career, right? This season with Milwaukee, he was shooting 37.9% on twos. He actually shot worse from 2 than from 3 with the Bucks this season. For his career, he's a 44% 2-point shooter. That's fine, but you'd like to see a higher digit than that for anybody. 7 for 7 in this game. Obviously, he's only played 4 games with the Pacers. He's currently hitting 53% of his twos with Indiana. So that was big. He went 1 for 5 from deep. Normally, given his skill set and his background, you'd expect that to be a really off night for Jordan Nwora. Instead, he found a ton of ways to have success. And I think that's kind of indicative of what's kind of clicking for him now, right? Because for him, for a while, the shot's the thing, and that's what the Pacers kind of want to figure out what they have with him. But if he's able to be more of an inside contributor, doesn't have to just be a shooter who finds his spots, that's really big, right? And he even noted that Jeremiah Johnson asked him this on the broadcast when he asked him about his game and fitting in with the bench, and Nwora said, starting to feel good, starting to realize where I need to be on the court. When I talked to him in my one-on-one interview with him just before the All-Star break, he kind of noted that that's part of the change, right? When you go to a faster paced team or just a different system in general, whatever different thing it is for you, it's not just like knowing the plays. It's like, where do you go in transition? When this team that loves to run is flying, do you go to the corner? Do you locate to the wing? Do you go to the back? Like, where am I supposed to go and stand? And you can still see every so often he'll, be involved in the play. And then when he exits via a cut, he'll get a little too close to a teammate, right? And that's just because his instinct and habit from an old team or from an old system is to go to this spot when he's supposed to go slightly somewhere else. It's not like he's causing problems. It's just the adjustment. In this game, that obviously happened less, but he also finished plays. 7 for 7 from 2 is huge for him. And a lot of those came on some poacher-like plays, as I call them, soccer term, right? But finding ways to get the ball in good spots, whether that's from an offensive rebound or a well-timed cut into the lane. And on this Pacers team that's going to pass like crazy, 35 assists for the Pacers. On a not high scoring game, they were whipping that thing around, and Nwora was a big part of that. He got the ball in the paint where he needed to. He finished some tougher shots. He was brilliant scoring, right? And so this game not only showed that he's fitting in a little better, but that he might have a little bit of a role that isn't just requiring him to be a shooter. Granted, I still think long term, that's likely going to be his best skill, his ability to be kind of a stretchy four. But if he can be a little bit better inside the arc than he's shown with the Bucks in the past, who liked him to be more of a shooter, right? 3-point attempt rate over 50% this year. And this is part of being traded from a contender to a not contender is, and we talked about this with Jordan Tresky when we were doing the Jordan Nwora show last week, is, when you're with a good team, you focus on skills, and when you're developing, you focus on skills that mostly help that team. When you go to a team with more of a development mindset, you kind of work on everything and you get a more well-rounded game of growth. And I think that can help Nwora with some of the things he struggled with in the past. This game, an early indicator, it's just one game, obviously getting way ahead of myself, but 7 for 7 from 2, very encouraging. Of course, the three's got to go at some point. History says it will. For sure, at some point, he's 4 for 14 now with the Pacers. He still hit one. But 18 points on 12 shots for Jordan Nwora. Really impressive stuff. If he made all his free throws, he would have had a 20-point outing in Orlando. So that was good stuff from the newest Pacer on the offensive end. But that's not all of his contributions in this game. He also had 8 rebounds, which was the most of any bench player. Did better than Jalen Smith on the glass. He tied Miles Turner for the team lead. Granted, no player except for Buddy Hield. 2 players played 30 minutes. I just said something incorrect. Nobody played a lot in this game because there was some bench time down the stretch. So no one should have been clanging a ton of rebounds, but Nwora got 8. He was this goes back to that poacher term from soccer, like nose for the ball in this game when it came off the rim for his team or the other team. And, he's quick to find now. He knows the transition's coming, the guard that needs the ball, or when he gets an offensive board, he put it up and in a few times or kicked it out to the right guy. He did a really good job finding the ball on the rim, and that's not a skill he's historically shown at a high level. He's not I think he's a decent rebounder, 3.6 per game his second year with the Bucks in under 20 minutes. That's pretty good. I think that's an under-discussed skill of his. But the offensive rebounding was impressive in this game, not known for that, although the defensive rebounding has been there for him. So to see that come together on a good scoring night, again, kind of shows what he can be at his absolute best for this Pacers team. But wait, there's more. Well, there is more. One steal, obviously not known for his defense, but had a steal. Again, did well in basically every aspect of this game. I would say he was fantastic. He was plus 17. Like, I should have said this first. That was a team high for the Pacers. Carlisle actually kept him in with the starters for a stretch in the fourth quarter, right? It was, I believe the lineup at that point was Haliburton, Hield, Mathurin, Nwora, and Turner, right? So they get a little more size that way, but they still get most of their starting five out there with Mathurin. And for Nembhard, I thought that was a cool way, one, to reward him for his good play, but kind of to explore how he can fit with that group. The defense was there. And the final stat to get to, of course, 6 assists. Jordan Nwora, the passer. Where did that come from? 6 assists for Nwora. One of his better passing games of his entire career, quite frankly. 6 assists is his career high. So he did set his career high in distributing for the night. He was just finding the gaps to get his teammates the ball, to get himself the ball, to be available, to be a weapon. And he helped out on the defensive end. Really impressive game. And it's not reasonable to expect this from him every night because he had a career high in assists and he had all of his 2s. Like, these are not things that he's historically done well, but doing them in his 4th game with the new team, certainly encouraging. And certainly you saw the signs of what Jordan Nwora can be if he develops in the way the Pacers hope. And if you remember, right, Kevin Pritchard said it, Rick Carlisle said it, they have kind of sniffed around, pursued him, whatever the right term is before. Nwora confirmed that himself, right? He was a restricted free agent, so it's not like they could have easily signed him last summer, but this is a guy they've had interest in before. And so they finally get him, and they can get him in their system and say, let's see how you fit. We need 4s. We got one. And the Pacers are, after saying that, putting him out there and figuring out what he can do. And finally, he looks a little more comfortable and was making those good plays on Saturday night. So encouraging stuff for a new young Pacer. And it'll be interesting to see if he can build on that with tougher opponents like Dallas and Chicago coming on this road trip. San Antonio, I almost just said, they're not a tougher opponent, but really impressive stuff from Nwora, and we'll see where that can go for him and the Pacers. He was not the only bench player with an impressive night. The other one was Jalen Smith, and there's more to his big game to lead with than just having a big game. Let's talk about what Smith did well and how he was able to have a big night in Orlando coming off the bench. Before we do that, though, let me talk to you guys about Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories, then you've got to try Built Bar. The holidays are done. It's almost March now, and if your goal is to eat a little healthier for the rest of this year, you've got to try Built Bar. Health and taste collide. They're so delicious, you won't think they're good for you. Perfect for your New Year's resolution or your whatever resolution now that it's almost March. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, coconut almond, my favorite, peanut butter brownie, and so many more. I'm not sure how they do it, but they taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is they're healthy, right? So only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. You don't need to wait around to get a box. You used to order them from built.com, but now you can go get them at your local Walmart or your Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Pharmacy section, you can grab yourself a 4-pack of the Built Bars, cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're near Sam's Club, you can grab a 13-bar box for some of their hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. Try Built Bar today. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, go to Locked On Hawks, because the Hawks have hired Quinn Snyder to be the head coach of the Trae Young-led Atlanta Hawks. He replaces Nate McMillan, former Pacers coach, in Atlanta. Brad Rowland will have all the details and what it means for the Hawks that they have their new guy in Quinn Snyder. Shout out to Joe Prunty for filling in and getting a win in his one game as the interim head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. Back to the Pacers, though, because a noteworthy game for many reasons in Orlando for Jalen Smith. And then the first thing to say here has nothing to do with Jalen Smith's stats or production or what he did on the floor. Is that he was on the floor at all? I was kind of stunned. I had to put it in my notes. First quarter, Jalen Smith, first big off the bench, and that maintained for the whole game. Jalen Smith ends up 17 seconds shy of 20 minutes, so I will just say 20 minutes for the sake of discussion for the rest of this podcast. He played for 20 minutes in this game. Isaiah Jackson did not play at all, and Daniel Tice did not play at all. So that is very noteworthy for several reasons. One being that a lot of people have been wondering why young bigs, myself included in this group, by the way, young bigs are not playing instead of veteran bigs, right? And the other one being that Jalen Smith was even out of the rotation in ways that Isaiah Jackson wasn't in like late January, early February, right? I think he played, I have this stat in a story I wrote about Smith's play. I'll dig it up. I think he played in 46 of the Pacers' first, Jalen Smith played in 46 of the Pacers' first 49 games. And then in the ensuing 13 games, he's only played in 6, right? So clearly his standing in the rotation changed. Some of that's the Pacers switched to small ball. Then there was that stretch where Isaiah Jackson was playing more than him. Then Tice returned, right? It all kind of contextually makes sense. And yet it's still a little weird kind of given how the season has gone. And yet in this game, they turned back to him. And this is right after, I don't know if many remember this, when the Pacers beat Chicago right before the All-Star break, Jalen Smith was the guy. The fourth quarter, the second half, really, he was the backup center, right? Tice was out that night, and in the second half, Isaiah Jackson had a sickness, and he only played in the first half. So they needed Jalen Smith to come in and play, and he was great. He was really good that night. And Rick Carlisle after the game said, Jalen Smith, his minutes were the difference, right? We needed him to be great. And then Carlisle said, quote, he has continued to work and keep himself ready. And then he said, that's the kind of player that we're looking to build with, a guy that's just a straight professional and is always ready to go. And that's what he did against Orlando. He was ready to go despite not playing much recently, not always being in the rotation, didn't play in their first game out of the break against the Celtics. And then immediately they turned back to him being the backup in Orlando, and he took full advantage. He was excellent. And it wasn't the way that Jalen Smith is usually excellent. He did do the rebounding thing. He had 4 of the Pacers' 10 offensive boards. He had 7 rebounds in under 20 minutes. He was good on the glass, right? That is what I've considered to be his best skill this season, is rebounding, something the Pacers have needed, quite frankly. And he was good at it. 7 boards. He also had 7 points on 3 for 8 shooting. Could have been a little more efficient, certainly. Hit a 3. That was big for him. His offensive output was just fine. But that big one, 5 blocks, career high blocks game for Jalen Smith. His defense was fantastic. And that's something that Carlisle noted after the game. First of all, that quote I said earlier where he said Jalen Smith and Jordan Nwora were exceptional off the bench, but then he said Jalen Smith, 5 block shots. He kind of anchored the defense for that second unit, which allowed the Pacers bench to maintain a high level of defense. that the starters did that allowed them to run, right? We already went through what this looked like, but for Jalen Smith, a very impressive game. One of his best defensive games, maybe ever, certainly in a Pacers uniform. And he combined it with a decent offensive night and getting those rebounds. Pacers, who've been struggling on the glass, still lost the rebounding battle in this game, but that's not a fair assessment kind of the game because the Pacers missed 51 shots and the Magic missed almost 60. So there's more opportunities going in the other direction. It's not the perfect way to describe it, and I just did terrible math. But either way, Pacers did better on the glass. They didn't get killed there, and Smith was a big part of that. So credit to Jalen Smith. He was ready to go, and he played well. And that's what Carlisle was impressed with before the break in that Chicago game, that he was ready to come in and do a job. In that game, he had 4 rebounds. I don't think he scored or hit a shot, but those 4 rebounds were good. That defense was important. And I asked him about that, right? I talked to him before the Celtics game about that and about Malcolm Brogdon and their short overlap. And he said it meant a lot to get the praise from Carlisle. He said, I'm just here to do my job, be a great teammate, be ready whenever my number is called. And that's what he did against Orlando, right? He was ready when his number was called. And that can be hard to do when you're not in the rotation every single game. I will say, as much as fans don't like maybe the front court rotation right now, Carlisle does relay, his when he's going to play and not play a guy most of the time before games, right? Or before a stretch of games, whatever it happens to be. Guys have talked about having that conversation with him. So I'm sure Smith knew to some extent that he was going to play, but either way, he was ready when his number was called. The other thing I asked him about is it like a kind of a confidence boost, or does it, feel good to have an effective game like that after, not being in the rotation every night? And he said, didn't really have that much of an impact on me. I know what I'm capable of. And then he said, I know what I needed to do to help the team win. I just went out there and did it. It wasn't a moral win for me. It was just another day on the job. That's exactly the mentality Carlisle's talking about. Jalen Smith is ready to play, and he knows what he's going to do when he checks in, whether he's played every game for the last 10 games or he's played none of them. And that's very helpful for this young team that's kind of rotated guys in and out of this front court rotation, whether that's Jackson or Tice or Smith recently, to have that readiness whenever he comes in the game. So Smith did a great job of being prepared to play and capitalizing on the opportunity by playing well in a way that is kind of untraditional of him, right? When he plays, I usually expect that he'll be good on the glass and see what else he can add. In this game, it was hitting a 3, getting 4 offensive rebounds, and the 5 blocks that made him stellar on defense. He was plus 12, so he joined Haliburton and Nwora as the only guys with a better plus minus than plus 10. They were all really good. They all played in a good stretch together in the third and fourth quarters. And so credit to Jalen Smith for having one of his best games of the season at a key time. But again, it's like with Nwora, or really this game zoomed out in general. This wasn't just about Jalen Smith's good game. This was about what it could signal about the Pacers front court, because Daniel Tice didn't play at all. Instead, it was Jalen Smith. And so remember, for a little bit of time there, before Tice was healthy, but after the Pacers went small, you kind of have to compartmentalize where you're at in the Pacers season to discuss their front court rotation. But at that specific time I just discussed, after they decided small ball is good for them, right, mid to late December, and then you get into January, and they're kind of alternating these games of Smith and Jackson. Smith was playing fine, but then Tice returned, and he hasn't played as much, right? And since Tice returned on February 2nd, he had the 2 games where he was hurt and inactive, but every game he's been active, he's played, right, in that stretch as the backup in some way, including that game against Utah where he started, right? So this was the first game, this February 25th game in Orlando, that Tice was active and healthy, but didn't play, did not get any minutes. So I don't know if it's going to be Jalen Smith every game going forward. I don't know if it's going to be the thing where they go back to him and Isaiah Jackson. Maybe it's a 3-man carousel. But this was the first change where Daniel Tice, presuming Daniel Tice was healthy. I was not at this game to ask Rick Carlisle about his decision to play Jalen Smith, but presuming Tice is and was healthy for this game, this was the first time he's been healthy and active for a game and not played at all. This could signal a change in the Pacers front court rotation plans, perhaps to a young youth with a little over a month left of the season. We'll see. This has to happen for more than one game to be a pattern and something that is potentially a change to come. But this was the first time it happened, which is noteworthy and something worth watching. We'll see if Smith continues to play this way. We'll see if it's back to him and Jackson kind of toggling games. Maybe it's a matchup thing. There's a lot of reasons this could have happened, but encouraging that Jalen Smith was able to play well when he came in for his 6th game in his last 13, and noteworthy that there was a change in the rotation. It's going to be fascinating to see tomorrow if the Pacers can keep all this up against a much better team in the Dallas Mavericks. First, tomorrow's segment, we'll talk about the buyout market for the last time. Will the Pacers, could they get involved? Is there anybody that they is worth scooping up for them? Who would they even buy out to get a roster spot? We'll talk about that before Nick Engstad joins to talk about the Mavs with Kyrie Irving now in that matchup and team building as we do. Later this week, we'll talk Spurs. We'll talk tiebreakers. We'll talk about the games the Pacers play. A lot of fun stuff coming here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Hope you guys had a great weekend and enjoyed today's show. If you want to ask me anything about the Pacers, I'm on Twitter at TEastNBA, and the show is at Locked On Pacers. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you tomorrow.